I'd say that quantum physics is something, first off, the main fundamental core of quantum physics is knowing that when you find out more about how reality works, if you can optimize your energy, what you can do is then notice that as you optimize your inner energy, you then optimize your outer life, because there's an intimate correlation between your inner reality to your outer reality. So for me, learning quantum physics has absolutely transformed my life. And I'm going to share with you in this episode the 3 main techniques I use from quantum physics that have allowed me to create more abundance, to live in the kind of dream lifestyle I used to absolutely dream of. It's now my everyday because of these things that I'm going to be sharing with you today. Now, the first thing is understanding is that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It simply is. Just like when you think of that of radio waves. The radio waves and the radio stations, they already exist. It's about tuning to the frequency of the radio that you want. And when you tune to the frequency of the radio you want, you then perceive of that reality. But sometimes we have this notion around quantum physics or just around reality creation in general that I need to create a reality. I need to create it, which implies that that reality does not already exist. And what that also implies is that you have to do so much to make it actually come to fruition. However, what I found is more powerful is understanding the notion, first off, because our beliefs create our reality, having the awareness that the reality you want to experience, it already exists. You don't have to create it. You simply have to vibe in resonance with it. And you do that with your intention, you do that with your energy, and you do that by listening to the rest of this podcast episode, because that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about. Now, the first part that I want to talk about when it comes to this is understanding probability and intention. Now, there's a guy that I watch sometimes. His name is Thomas Campbell. He talks a lot about how reality is a virtual reality. He's a physicist. He's very smart. And he talks about how our reality is, in a way, a simulation. We are encompassing these avatar bodies, and we experience our reality through the 5 senses. And he talks about, he's got these kind of complex terms for it, like there's the individuated IUC, individuated unit of consciousness is like the ego body, I think. So some of these words are a little bit hard to follow in general, so I'm not going to be throwing around too much of the lingo. But in general, what he says and what he talks a lot about is the way you increase probability of something happening is by setting the intention. Intention increases probability. And that's something that I've found in my own life. When I looked at the success that I've had, it's come from intention. Now, the difference, and the way I use quantum physics for this, is that sometimes the way we look at this is we think that we need to have a desire for something. And many times a desire will propel us to take action. Desire will propel us to move in a certain direction and to claim a certain level of our power back and to decide this is who I am now. However, desire, unless it is turned into intention, it remains just a desire. If I sit here right now and say, I really want to record a podcast episode, that would imply that I'm not already doing it. Want means lack. I want to eat and drink a smoothie right now. I want to drink a smoothie, a delicious smoothie. And when I say I want that, it means I don't currently have it. But how ridiculous would it look if I had a smoothie in front of me right now and I'm drinking it and going, guys, I want a smoothie right now. You'd go, what are you talking about, Aaron? You have a smoothie. You are the smoothie. You are drinking the smoothie. So what intention is, and this is where a lot of people get caught up as well, is thinking that intention is not action. Action is intention, and intention is also a declaration of a certain outcome of reality. So, for example, you can intend that you're going to go to the gym today. And if you desire to go to the gym, that's different. You may desire to go to the gym, but not actually go. But if you intend for it, you declare it. You say, I am going to do this. An outcome probability, you are stating it and declaring it that you are going to experience it. So an intention is a declaration of a future potential, and you're declaring it right now that you are going to experience it. And when you follow that up with action, that's where the power is. So for a long time, even on YouTube, I told myself a story that one day I'm going to be a YouTuber and all of these things, but I was missing one component of it. I desired it. Man, did I desire to do what I love for a living. Man, did I desire to get out of a 9-to-5 job that was draining my energy, where I was being told what to do. I remember one time I was brought into an office working at Barney's, New York, in women's shoes. Like, you probably heard me tell the story, many different stories about this, but I was brought into an office, and they were, working in women's shoes at a high-end retail place where the average price point for a shoe is like $1,200 or $800 to $1,200. There's a lot of times where you're standing around not doing anything. So sometimes what we would do is we'd have one person on the floor, salesperson on the floor. The other person would go in the back and just kind of chill, kind of chill on their phone or something like that. And we did a lot of business through our phone too. And I remember that one time, my the store manager and my department manager brought me into this room. It was called the situation room, which I thought was funny because there's such a negative connotation behind a situation room. So I go into this situation room and sit down, and I get reamed for like probably 30 to 45 minutes, and I get shown a video of me on camera on my phone. Someone else was on the floor, and there was no customers in the department at all. But what they did is they made me watch that video for like 10 minutes of me just sitting there. And it was so demeaning and degrading. And I told them, I was like, after a minute, I was like, I got the point. I'm not supposed to be on my phone. I get the point. And they said, no, continue to watch it. And I was like, okay. So I sat there for another minute. I was like, guys, I get the point. I don't want to sit here and keep watching it. And they were doing it to, I guess, give me a negative association with being on my phone while at work. However, in that moment, I had a realization. From that pain, decided that I don't want to be working a 9-to-5 job. I don't want to be told what to do, and I don't want to have a boss. And I've never liked having a boss. The only reason I had a sales commission job was because I could write my own paycheck in a way, because I could set the intention every day for a certain amount that I wanted to sell, and I was in charge of my own paycheck. By the way, intention and selling, probability, intention, and selling, extraordinarily powerful. When I was working there, I started at 0 every day, and what I would do is set the intention to sell a certain amount, and I would go into work with that intention, and I would have the intention of adding value to people, which is a more expansive energy. And if I would remain in a positive state, so it's intention plus emotion. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this. An elevated in emotion with an increased intention. Those two things are extraordinarily powerful. So kind of the reason I'm sharing this story with you with the whole situation room is because when you decide that there's enough pain you've experienced, and no matter what, you're going to figure it out, many times you can then go and figure it out. And until you get to that place to where you make that decision, that intention, things remain on autopilot. I was making videos once a month, then once a week, and then when I went daily was shortly after that whole situation experience. So something that appeared to be very negative, the meaning I gave it turned out to be a very positive thing. And it was shortly after I was studying quantum physics, understanding metaphysics. Meta means beyond, so beyond physics of 3D reality. And what I began to do is I began to set the intention, but remember, intention is also about action many times. There were times I was listening to people on YouTube, and they're talking about manifestation, and some of them would talk about taking massive action. And I did not like to hear about taking massive action. I was like the guy that was like, I just want to sit on my couch. I want to think about being a speaker like Tony Robbins one day, and I'm going to think about it, and eventually it'll happen if I think about it. And I'd go into work, and I'd have these little synchronicities. Like one time I went into work, for example, I helped Sage Robin, Tony Robbins' wife. I helped her, and that was an interesting experience. She was really nice. She was especially really nice once I think she realized that I knew, that I recognized her, and then she was like, I was like her people, you know what I mean? She was really nice, though, and she was with her assistant, she was buying shoes, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I wanted to say some cheesy thing, like, one day I'm going to do that for a living, too. But I knew there's so many people that say that, but do they back it up with the action? So that was about a year before I went, full-time on YouTube, and I really went for it. And before that, I actually met Jack Canfield as well. Jack Canfield is the author of the Chicken Noodle Soup of the Souls book or something like that, those books. He was in the movie The Secret. And I helped him out of actually synchronicity. He was trying to buy a piece of like a dress for his wife. His wife wasn't with him. He was just grabbing it as a gift. And he walked over to women's shoes because there was no one in the clothing department. And he's like, okay, hey, can you ring me up for this? And I was like, you look familiar. And he looked a little bit different than he did on the movie, because I think that movie was made years ago. And then I was like, he looks so familiar. And then when I took his card, he had the Black American Express card, and I saw his name, and I was like, wow. So that's when I kind of like geeked out. I was like, yeah, one day I'm going to do what you do for a living. So I kind of had to tell him that. And he's like, cool. He's actually really nice. He's like, cool. You know, I teach people how to become coaches and how to do what I do for a living. I do it in Palm Springs or somewhere else. And I went online and looked at it. He gave me his card. I still have his card somewhere in a Ziploc baggie just to show people kind of, that was such a synchronicity, but just to also show people kind of like where I'm at now, and how I am now. Because listen to this. This is kind of cool. So I go online to check that out, and it was like $10,000 or $20,000 to become a coach and to be coached by him and to go to his like live events. I was like, well, I was working selling women's shoes. I was making maybe $65,000 to $70,000 a year. I wasn't making enough to go spend $20,000 on something like that. So I ended up passing up by that, but I kept it in mind. I always remembered that, and I just started going daily. I followed everything I was doing up with massive action. So that's what I did. I started taking massive action, started making daily videos on YouTube, went way beyond anything I could imagine as far as how much content I was creating. However, that really changed my self-image. Now, fast forward it to recently, it is kind of cool. Things have kind of come full circle. Jack Canfield was doing a live event type thing, mastermind at actually that place that I go to in Costa Rica, and he was doing one there where it was like it was an invite-only mastermind where you had to be like a social media influencer and all of these things. And from what I understand, I don't know if for sure he did this or not, but my name was dropped for me to come to that. So the company reached out to me, and the place in Costa Rica that we go to, and said, hey, you're invited to come to this high-end mastermind thing, and Jack Canfield's running it, all of this stuff. So Jack Canfield is running it, and it was only a week or two notice, and I was already had plans to be in Tulum in Mexico, so I said no to it. However, I thought, wow, this is cool how it's come full circle. Back in the day, I was helping someone with shoes or with, ringing them up for something. And now that same person that I told, hey, one day I'm going to do what you do, I'm actually doing what they do, and I'm invited to one of their mastermind things. And what did it take for me to do that, by the way? The intention, a declaration of a certain reality of me being a full-time YouTuber, and then following that up with massive action. And massive action is not the thing you might want to hear, but it depends on where you are as well. Some people may be in a certain vibration to where maybe you're into the spiritual information, but you haven't been taking massive action. Sometimes massive action can actually be one of the most powerful parts of this when you realize that it's about being that kind of person. And when you're being it, it's fun to take action. It's fun for me to make these podcast episodes. It's fun for me to make the, YouTube videos in general, because it's who I am. It's a part of my identity. So the first part of this is probability and intention. You want to increase the probability of something happening in your life, set the intention. Intention is a declaration of a certain probable future outcome, declaring it in the present moment, and then following that up with action. And by doing that, that's how I became a full-time YouTuber. That's how I'm now becoming the kind of person that travels and speaks for a living. It's intention, exactly like I just am describing it to you. So intention increases probability. Now, the second part to this process of using quantum physics to create your dream reality that I used is understanding that because every reality exists right now that you can imagine, every reality exists, every version of you in a way. One thing that this works extraordinarily powerful for, and I use this to stop smoking weed, I dropped smoking weed from my identity. So when we realize the past that we tell ourselves about our identity has a very powerful pull on how we're showing up in the world. Now, for example, if you see yourself as a smoker, what will happen is because you have the self-image of being a smoker, when you go to quit smoking, you're fighting your identity. You're fighting what is natural and a part of who you are from the identity standpoint. So a way to quit smoking cigarettes is to actually drop it from your identity altogether and to realize you don't have to quit smoking because you're not a smoker. Instead, you drop it completely from your identity. When I was smoking weed, that's how I got rid of it. I saw myself now as not a smoker anymore. I didn't tell myself a story that I am a smoker and that it's very hard to smoke and that someone else that stopped smoking and then all this stuff happened. You know, you don't really get withdrawals with quit smoking weed in the way you might with cigarettes and nicotine. But that will make the process so much easier. Think about it. When people say, I am going to lose weight, I'm going to lose weight. If you imply that you're going to lose weight, that's also implying that you're losing a part of yourself because your initial self-image is having that weight. And then what you'll do from a self-image standpoint is you'll do everything you can to find that weight somewhere else. So you might lose it for a period of time, but guess what? You're going to find it again because your identity is doing everything it can to remain consistent to the way that you define yourself. So you don't want to lose weight. Instead, you want to release weight. You don't want to stop smoking cigarettes. You want to realize that you never did smoke. When you realize there's an infinite number of probable realities that exist, and you tell yourself a story that I'm a smoker, I'm a smoker, I'm a smoker, it will continue to perpetuate that reality. So the key to this is understanding, instead, the focus can go on dropping it from your identity altogether. And the first step to this process is being aware of your identity. The way you view yourself is what is having you experience certain things in your life. And if you change the way you view yourself, you then change your life. So for me in my own life, I've changed viewing myself as having ADHD. I used to believe I had ADHD. I went to a doctor that told me I had ADHD. People told me that first. Like, you have a lot of energy. What's wrong with you? I was like, there's something wrong with me. I'm going to go to a doctor. And also, it was true. I wasn't as able. But, I think about it now. I've always had a lot of energy. Once I started realizing that I had ADHD because people told me that, then I had problems focusing. I don't think I even had problems focusing until I defined myself as that. And then it was like hard for me to focus. And when I go to that 9-to-5 job at Nordstrom's, it was hard for me to focus. And if I took Adderall, it was easier for me to make money and to stay focused on helping customers rather than, focus on other things. But the labels and the identity keep us in the reality, living out that reality. So the key to this is really becoming aware of your own identity, the way you view yourself. And if you change your past, and by realizing that there's a past where you smoked cigarettes, there's a past where you didn't smoke cigarettes. Define yourself as the one that doesn't smoke cigarettes anymore. As you change in the present moment, you change your past as well. That's what quantum physics shows us, by the way. Quantum physics shows us that every time we remember something, we take something out of our memory bank, we look at it, we change it, and we change the story we tell ourselves about it, then we put it back in our memory bank. By the time you've thought of something 100 times or even 5 times, it's a completely different memory. It has overlaid these different perceptions, these different opinions, these different stories. So if we know that, then why can't we create a greater degree of change between the past and the present moment right now? Every moment's a new moment. Every moment's a new moment. Every moment's a new moment. What story are we telling ourselves now? What story are we telling ourselves now? What story are we telling ourselves now? Because that story is going to be what reality we experience. So I've changed my story of believing that I am a smoker, that I have ADHD, that I'm a 9-to-5 worker, and I need a boss. A lot of people have that subconscious story. And as I changed all these stories, my life began to change. But if you want to make it easy for you to quit smoking, for you to quit a bad habit, then realize that it's not your identity anymore. You chose at a certain point in your past, you chose, this is who I am now. Someone told me I had ADHD. I said, okay, this is what I have. I have a lot of energy, which is a disorder, and it's hard for me to focus now and all these things. And I told myself that story. And then that became my reality. At a certain point, you have to take responsibility for it. You start smoking cigarettes, you take responsibility. Realize, I started smoking cigarettes. And then, from that point, you can say, do I want this? Is this serving me? And then you can actually let it go. But you have to first off become aware of it. And then you can actually let it go. So, that's the key, is the identity. With quantum physics, that will change your life in ways you can't even imagine. I simply started to see myself as a full-time YouTuber. I started to see myself as somebody that was more zen. Think about it. I start meditating, and as I start meditating, I see myself as somebody that is like that. That is that kind of person. That is more Zen-like. That meditates instead of needing ADHD and Adderall. That changed my identity. Change your identity, you change your life. Now, the third way to use quantum physics is kind of I was talking about earlier when it comes to our reality, understanding like a radio wave. The realities that we can imagine, all of them already exist, just like all the radio waves already exist. A radio tuner just tunes to a certain frequency that already exists. If you're watching television and you want to change it from Animal Planet to National Geographic, Nat Geo or whatever, you don't have to create National Geographic or Animal Planet. You don't have to create it. It already exists. All you have to do is tune to that channel and you will perceive of it. In the same way, when we talk about quantum physics, when you tune yourself to a certain reality with your emotion, with your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, you then begin to experience that channel of reality. So knowing that you don't have to create it because it already exists allows manifestation to become easier than ever. What I did to become successful on YouTube is I identified the version of me using the bridge, which is your imagination. I used imagination to view that version of me living my dream life. And as I imagined that version of me, I saw that I was making videos every day. I saw I was passionate about certain things. I had a certain type of morning routine. I read a certain type of books. And I just decided that from this point going forward, this is who I am now. I became that version of me. I realized that that version of me was more me than the 9-to-5 version of me that was working a 9-to-5 job I wasn't passionate about. So that is the key. It already exists. Imagine the version of you that is killing the game. Killing the game. The version of you that's being a certain way, that is in that ideal reality. Use your imagination and then realize that version of you may be more you than the you currently think you are. And you may say to yourself, I did a talk recently at my buddy's company, and he said, somebody was asking, they're like, well, how do you act as if in this frequency if it feels like, without feeling like you're deluding yourself? The problem is, we've been deluding ourselves our whole entire life about some identity that we may not actually really be. Am I really that 9-to-5 job person that was working that 9-to-5 job? Is that really who I am? No, that was the disillusion in itself. That was against my nature. My nature is for me to work for myself. My nature is for me to be empowered, for me to be passionate about what I'm doing, just like I'm passionate about making this podcast episode. But the part of me that was the disillusion was the part of me playing small, believing that I had to work that 9-to-5 job to be successful, believing that I was these other parts of myself that wasn't really in alignment. So when you realize that the reality you want to experience already exists, what you can then begin to do is decide that this is who I am now. And as you begin to do that, you'll realize that your life begins to change in profound ways. So these 3 different things I've applied in my own life, they're ways of understanding quantum physics. They're not as logical, techie, and like equations that I'm giving you. They're just practical things you can apply. The double slit experience, for example, the double slit experience shows this thing that has to do with probability. Depending on where you put your focus is whether you perceive of one or the other. And it's the same thing with probability and intention. It's the same thing with changing your identity, and the same thing with understanding the reality you want to experience already exists. When you decide that that's who you are now, that will change your life more powerfully than ever before. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can subscribe to me on iTunes or Spotify, either one. And I do 2 episodes a week on Tuesday and Friday. I'm super excited to have all of you here. If you haven't already, could you also do me a huge favor and review the podcast? It really means the world. I'm going to be putting more energy into these podcasts, and it really helps me know that I'm in the right direction and doing it for you. You know what I mean? So with that being said, as always, I'll see you on the next episode. Peace, much love, and namaste. So what you just saw on the podcast, or what I just recorded, was part of the podcast. I have a storehouse of podcast episodes on iTunes and Spotify. They're both completely free. They are just like this. Some of them are with other people. Some of them go very deep on certain ideas. And I get so many DMs from people that love the podcast. It's got a very different energy. I'm sure maybe you felt it's a little bit different energy than the YouTube videos. If this is something that you want to listen to more of, I highly encourage you to check the links below. and you can see them there, and you'll get notified as well as to when the new ones come out. But nonetheless, this is another way I'm going to be sharing some of the clips on here on this channel, and then the rest of them you will see on the podcast episodes, and you'll see a storehouse of really cool episodes below. With that being said, I look forward to sharing them with you there and seeing you there. As always, peace, much love, and namaste.